Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And before we get started, perhaps I'll give you guys a little bit of feedback because I did see a big part of the FanFest from home stream, which I thought was pretty interesting. We had a really long talk with CCP Hilmar and CCP Burger talking about lots of aspects from the game. Titans, you know, they don't really like the proliferation and how easy it is these days to store a Titan in safety in the Keep Star, and yeah, wormhole space might be in the crosshairs as well. What they don't like there is just the ability to keep rolling wormholes towards the content that you want. I think if they change that, it's going to be very controversial, because while on the one hand I understand that they want to bring chaos and they see this as sort of a safety aspect, this is a sword that cuts on two sides, because of course finding content is really important in wormhole space as well. And well, if there's no way that you can change the static quickly, it also adds a certain amount of safety once you happen to be on a static that just leads to nowhere. So this is a change that I think they have to be very careful before implementing. After that, there was basically an announcement for the app should be coming. Might be pretty huge because we will have the ability to change your skill queue in that, so that's going to be pretty major. Definitely a sort of a test because it's written in the Unreal Engine apparently, but that might be pretty big. I personally don't plan to use that. I have plenty of spare time to spend behind my own PC, and well, I don't like to be distracted when I'm not spending the time behind my PC. And then Fleet Finder should see an update as well. I think that could be interesting. Personally, I do mostly play solo, but perhaps with the new content, with invasions and things like that, I might look to join some fleets or perhaps start some fleets as well. So yeah, definitely worth a look, and looking forward to whatever is coming next for EVE Online, of course. Let's take a quick look at the new Eden store next, see what's happening here. Some bundles front and center. The police skins being described as being hot. They are pretty damn hot. Vexor, Ishtar, Thorax, good god, Brutix and Brutix Navy issue. Those look pretty damn amazing. 110 plex, that's not that much, I think. Very much doable for some of the best looking plex skins in the game. Alright, definitely the new ones here still, I like those, the Vital Shift skins, very nice with the black and the orange. And then here, look at that, Erebus police skin, Nyx police skin. Actually, honestly, these look okay, but it's on the sub-capitals like Megatron, Hyperion, Brutix, that I think this skin really shines compared to the capitals in this case. That's personal taste, of course. Not really seeing any sales or anything like that, so you get some bundles and you get some really awesome looking ships right here at the front page. Let's move on to the market, of course. That's why everyone is here. We'll start with some plex and stuff. It's gonna start at around 3:30. Like that. Let's go for the plex market. 3.7 million, a one sell order here in JTA. That's the price that I chose, especially because in the player owned trade hubs we go to a little bit less than 3.7 million. Buyers in JTA 3.5 million, just above that, and that is pretty much the price in the Tranquility Trading Tower as well. Price history, you can see that we dipped a little bit too low for the market, going down to 3.3 million ISK, and now we're coming back to just above 3.5 million ISK. Maybe quick feedback as well from the discussion. A lot of people see this decrease in the price of plex, as well a decreased interest in the game, considering everything that's been happening with the nullsec blackout, with the changes to nullsec in general, and then the announced changes to the Sinos as well. CCP Hilmar, I think, correctly analyzed that this is actually also ISK itself increasing in value again. You know, less botting, less easy ratting, all of that increased risk basically means that if you do manage to grab ISK from activities in the game at this point, especially in nullsec, you are basically getting something that is valued a lot more in the economy. There's always two sides to every coin, of course, when it comes to the sandbox economy, and I think here this one is very true. We also have the numbers for July, which apparently definitely, if I read that analysis correctly, means a lot less ratting income, but they actually switched to mining quite a bit in order to keep busy to make up for that. So perhaps I'll take a closer look at the July numbers. We'll see how that works out later. But here for Plex, basically we have an increase to 3.5 million, which is still quite a ways away from the top at 4.5 million. Is skill extractors next, maybe taking a quick look at that, because of course it's followed Plex so closely, up to 420 million ISK. You can see here on the 5-day moving average that we are starting to flatten out after that correction basically of the dip below 400 million ISK. 416 to 417 for the sellers, and in Jita, what are we talking about? I should really use the filter for that. Up to 427 almost. That's 10 million difference. Yeah, that's the difference in taxes, of course, between Jita 44 and the Perimeter Tranquility Trading Tower. Buyers coming in at 409 to 395 after that, so that's just one buy order. In the Trade Tower, they go up to 409 in Jita itself. Most of them actually trying to buy this for less than 400 million. So there is definitely, I think, room for further correction. And if you look at this 5-day moving average, I think the market will already start to hesitate. Multiple pilot trading certificate continuing a slow decline despite decreasing volumes as well. That's quite a bit of a surprise, going below 1.5 billion ISK, just below that for the sellers, and 1.3 billion ISK for the buyers as well. Very interesting. Could it be that there is very little need for the multiple pilot trading certificates because of all of the extra skill points that CCP has given out? I think that that is a possibility, but to see this pressure at this point is a little bit not what I expected, especially considering the bounce for Plex here. So very interesting pullback, going well below 1.5 billion, especially if you go for a competitive buy order. No, it's 1.4 billion in Perimeter again. So that's a big difference. Look at that, less than 1.3 in Jita and up to 1.4, a bit above that, in the Perimeter Trading Tower. So keep that in mind, but it is definitely possible to grab them well away from 1.5 billion, which is not bad if you consider the top at 2 billion ISK. Next up we have the injectors, so let's start with the large scale injector that is now finally bouncing off of what seems to be a primary bottom here at 800 million ISK. That's a serious pullback as well, from 1 billion to 800 million, losing 20% of its price here, and right now we get a little bit of a bouncy behavior with even today's daily average going back down already. Sellers are coming in at 820 million ISK, buyers are coming in at 788. That is actually finally a real decent margin. So it's let's see, 820 in the trade hub, 828 in Jita, and then the buyers are at 788 in the trade hub and 785 to 785 in Jita. So all right, definitely a different dynamic here when it comes to the large scale injectors, and a real margin of more than 30 million ISK here between sellers and buyers. That's actually decently significant. After that we have the small scale injectors that have much calmer landing on what you could consider its bottom, a bit above 170, no, even below that. Oh, Jesus. 169 for the sellers and 157 still for the buyers, so around 160 could actually be a price that you can grab small scale injectors, considering a top at 210. That's not bad. Last year though we were below 150 million ISK, so it's all relative. It really depends on what you think all of that extra SP that we got from CCP for basically logging in and playing the game every single day. Do you think that that will have kept activity above the normal summer levels, or do you think that that it doesn't really matter, and so that now that we're approaching the end of August we'll actually start to see a resurgence? I actually think that September could still be a very interesting month, sort of a transition between the decrease in activity in the summer because people tend to go outside a little bit more during the summer, and then in September there is that switch from you get a lot of free time as a younger person, you gotta start to go back to school, and as a result there might still be a bit of hesitation to come back to EVE Online. If CCP then announces stuff for the winter, that's when I think we'll start to see a real surge. So there is still, in my opinion, a chance that we'll see a pretty decent drop off for September. We'll see how it works out, of course. And then finally we've got the daily alpha injector landing at 50 million ISK, top at 70 million, so that's also definitely a really decent decrease. And compared to last year, this is definitely not bad. 51 to 53 million for the sellers, 48 million for the buyers. You can probably grab one for less than 50. Look at 50 million on the entire chart. I would say that the daily alpha injectors look pretty interesting as well for an investment at this point. Next up, let's take a look at, damn it, and I made a mistake. I moved this folder in here. Can I move you back like that? Yep, there we go. Minerals coming in at 10:30, let's say. Alright, and so, surprise result from the economic numbers for July. Mining increased despite the fact that a lot of workers will have switched from the harvest drones to the Tech2 mining drones, cutting their yield in half, but increasing the safety for those drones. So let's get started. Here is the titanium chart, flat at 7 ISK on a 1-year high point. That is not bad, of course. And here we have to take the filter out. We are talking 684 for one seller of 2 million units, basically someone with very little patience. Most of them are trying to sell at around 722, 1.6 billion. It's a decent amount, but this is not out of the ordinary. And then buyers coming in at 682. That means that 7 ISK for titanium is definitely possible. Seems to be the average right now, which is a great price, especially comparing it to what we've done over the last year, but also just historically speaking, 7 ISK for titanium is a great price actually. So very good news here for people that are mining, even in high sec. Mining for titanium, you're getting a decent return for the time spent. Of course, there is an increased risk there as well, because the triglavian patrols will actually take out some orcas if you're not paying attention or if you're not playing actively. So that might be a reason why we're also seeing pyrite actually go up to a 1-year high point. Our sellers at 6 ISK, it's 5.6, not bad. And then the buyers are above 5 ISK as well here for the first one. Very, very interesting. So a nice increase in price for pyrite up to 6 ISK, revaluing potentially here some of these former high sec minerals. This day and age, you don't really have to make that distinction anymore. But yeah, pyrite, a 1-year high point, 5.8 ISK on average here for the sellers. No, 5.6, excuse me. Not bad. Definitely a bit of a surprise boost here all of a sudden. If anyone has more information on what's happening, except that this could just be AFK mining taking a beating as well with the triglavian patrols. I don't really have any other explanations here. Next up, Mixlon. That could be interesting, and bouncing off of a 1-year low point of 55 ISK, basically its bottom throughout the year. We are now talking 56 ISK for the sellers, 53 ISK for the buyers, so we're still very low actually compared to the 1-year price here for Mexilon. Now historically this is still not crazy. Mexilon for 50 is a lot better than pyrite for 5 to 6 ISK, but considering the 1-year performance here, this is actually the worst performer, which is kind of strange, especially considering that they said mining activity in nullsec is up. That should mean that Mixlon is the bottleneck, but perhaps they can now fix that a lot more with moon mining. It is possible that they can actually grab some moons very specifically to create some Mixlon sources, and so if they have a better mix, then there is no longer a reason for Mixlon to be the outlier, the one that held on a lot better than all the other minerals because of its bottleneck status in 0.0. So that is perhaps an answer, because I did read that under the umbrella they can actually increase mining activities by taking all the moons and then by really scheduling them correctly so that they can keep going with either very big fleets grabbing lots of minerals very quickly, or just chaining it. So depending on the size of the available fleet, they can basically create a schedule that is tailor-made for that, and that actually increases their efficiency. Very interesting, of course, that this is one of the responses to the nullsec blackout, that people are moving to more moon mining and things like that. Might also explain why my refinery BPCs have shot up in price so much. So that's actually interesting how sometimes the puzzle does start to make sense after you get just one sentence, one explanation as to what's happening in a certain part of space. And so I think that this is partly explaining why Mixlon is basically losing that bottleneck status at this point, and is actually doing way worse than titanium and pyrite pyrite, for instance. Now it might just be that bulkiness is starting to take over, because titanium is very bulky and pyrite, I think, is more bulky than Mexalon as well. Next up we have Isogen, also slightly increasing, getting back towards 17 ISK, I would say. It's actually 18.12 for the sellers and almost 17 ISK for the buyers, so not bad. I think we have a little bit more momentum to go here on the increased price, which is again very good news, of course, when it comes to just the value that you can see for yourself whenever you're mining a little bit, even if it is just in HiSec in regular belts. And Isogen is going up as well. Very interesting. Let's see if Noxium is managing a comeback. Nope, that one is being punished and now heading for a price range that is seriously below 300 ISK, actually heading towards 1-year low point regions, selling for 290 ISK, buyers coming in at less than 280 ISK here. That is another surprise decrease in price. And basically the pattern that I'm seeing here is that those that have performed very poorly over the year are now finally resurging a little bit, and then those that have actually held on decently well to their price are now finding themselves in trouble. Mexalon is in trouble, Noxium is clearly in trouble as well when it comes to the price, but keep in mind that over the last year and a half to 2 years, Noxium has actually done decently well compared to the decline for titanium and the terrible decline for pyrite and Isogen. And so perhaps here it's the same explanation if Nullsec has switched a lot more towards moon mining in order to increase their mining activity, because ratting has become a lot more risky, then it is entirely possible that they also keep the right mix of minerals in mind whenever they plan, of course, for their moon extractions. And so Noxium and Mexalon would be, I think, like the first two casualties of that activity, that new focus in 0.0. After that we've got the former Nullsec Minerals. Zydrine is holding on really well to a price of just above 500 ISK, and that is very stable. 510 for the sellers, 489 to 490 for the buyers, 500 right in the middle of that. So Zydrine seems to have managed to find a price. 500 ISK seems to be what the market's willing to pay for that. It's a different situation for Megasite. Look at that, massive jump up on a big increase of volume, and then an immediate decline back towards 400 ISK actually on today's daily average. 410 for the sellers, 397 for the buyers. And this is another one of those reverse situation. Megasite used to always be more expensive than Zydrine, and it looks like it's just a lot more easy to find Megasite sources, I think, from the moon mining activities. And so now Zydrine is actually like the top Tech 1 mineral when it comes to price, going for 500 ISK. After that we still have the champion, of course, Morphite, going for yet another 1-year high point above 12,000 ISK. Morphite is a bit different though, because it is of course tied to the Tech 2 economy, and it's a lack of supply. 13,500 ISK for the sellers, 13,000 ISK for the buyers. Yeah, we should have invested when we could have bought this for 7,500. This is practically, I mean, it's not exactly there, but it's almost a doubling of the price in a matter of 3 months. Talk about a good investment and a great time to sell right now. Morphite is doing really well. If you have made that trade, you still haven't sold, I think this is a great time to consider taking your 80% profits off of a Morphite trade. Looks really nice, and I'd say overall this is very good news. Seeing at least a little bit of a revaluation of some of these minerals, I think, is very welcome for the more casual miners, the HiSec miners, and things like that. We still have to compete against the impossible Rorcal yield, but there's a lot more risk involved in that now in Nullsec, and so I'd say overall I'm pretty happy with at least the impact of the Nullsec blackout on the mineral market right now. Next up we have the PI market coming in at 19 minutes. Let's go over this one. And so here I'm actually going to blame CCP a little bit for the lack of opportunities. I do think that this killing spree with you know, login reward and things like that for SP has increased activity in the game. And then the first, I think, thing that people will do after that is just keep up with whatever they need for PI, because that is just like the tiny time investment that you needed in order to just get that SP for killing 1, 5 or 10 rats. Well, then doing your PI on top of that is going to be pretty trivial as well, I think. And so I know that for me, on some weeks when I've been a little bit more busy, that's exactly what I did. Log in, kill a rat, do my PI, take a look at my BPCs. That's it. I'm good. I'm done. I've got other things to do. Log back out. That happens a couple of times, and I think that across the board this might have happened quite often, and be the reason why we only saw a few very local 1 year low points and things like that. Now here in the broadcast notes, let's maybe get started. We did just come from, well, an above average price back down to a less than average price around 1.9 million, but you can see that we're already bouncing off of that. It's back to 2 million for the sellers, a bit below 1.9 million for the buyers. So here quite a bit of volatility that seems to be increasing, but any clear-cut opportunities, we had one in early July when we could have bought this for like 1.7 million, but that's really it. Next up we've got the construction blocks. You can still see that slow increase in price and basically being able to stay around that 11,000 ISK price range, doing really well over this summer. 11,350 for one seller, most are actually at 12,000 ISK at this point, and we're staying just shy of 11,000 for the buyers. This is an average normal price at this point, probably even a little bit above average, and this is a very good performance for construction blocks over the summer. Sure, at some points we could have grabbed this for 10,000 ISK, but it never really came to a massive dip or a real summer slump here. Consumer electronics, exact same thing, except here at the end here we are declining a little bit in price, but I think if we look at the sellers, yep, they're still at 13,600 ISK, buyers at 10,500. It is showing a little bit of a lack of demand. That does seem to be the case, but it never gets to the point where the prices really go to 1 year low points that are so clear that you can definitely grab them. Sellers are still staying and able to stay at average price ranges. It just opens up the margin, which then from time to time closes up as demand picks up or some investors come to the market. So yeah, we never really got these opportunities. That's basically what I'm reading here. And so I think September could be a very interesting month depending on what happens there. Here next up we've got coolants. Yeah, well, they have already announced the Sino changes there, so it's gonna be really big to see how that's gonna impact the September numbers. But here for coolants, for instance, staying above average here as well, doing quite well. 13,200 for the sellers, 11,400 for the buyers. Decent margin, so it does show that there is not necessarily that much demand going on. Let's take a quick look at the Tranquility Tower numbers. Yeah, here we do have, but look at that, 1,300, 1,700. People are not really bringing in that big volumes. We do have a couple of sell orders, but then they immediately get closer to the JITA price. And then when it comes to buyers, you've got some of them, but competing at the same range. So I don't think it's unfair at this point still to keep an eye mostly on JITA for the prices. It's mostly, I think, gonna depress the sell prices a little bit, but I think you can actually manage to sell in JITA as well. Next up we have enriched uranium. Look at that, going well above average. 15,000 ISK here, 15,500 for the sellers, 13,500 for the first buyer. And then if we look at this, well, it goes down a little bit, 14.7, but the volumes 222, that's not really gonna have that big of an impact on the market just yet. Yeah, I think it's fair to keep an eye on just JITA for PI for now. So 15,500, well above average, very good performance again for enriched uranium, clearly well above average. Integrity response drones, staying below 2.5 million, so I'd say that this is also a normal price range. 2.4 million for the sellers, 2.1 million for the buyers. Yeah, nothing too drastic, and you can clearly see here I expected a real slump to happen during the summer, June, July, August, really managing to stay at that like 2.3, 2.4 million price range, which is a normal range. Mechanical parts, the first one, okay, this is potentially very interesting. You can clearly see now that we have decreased throughout the summer, and that here at the tail end the bottom seems to be falling out of the price of mechanical parts. 10,400 for the sellers and 9,600 for the buyers. Then it's gonna be interesting to see what happens in perimeter. You can see sellers, yeah, basically competing with JITA, and then buyers coming in at 9,600. It's pretty much the same price. So here we do have direct competition. Look at that, 0.1ing each other in the perimeter Tranquility Trade Tower. Very interesting, but cannot blame you. 9,600 disk for mechanical parts on the buy price is below the entire chart. Look at the May, April and March performances. 13,000 disk is possible for mechanical parts. So this is definitely the first real opportunity that I'm seeing where I'm saying, yeah, try to grab some mechanical parts for less than 10,000 disk. You're buying it below the entire chart, and it is definitely possible considering where the market's at here. Next up, we get nuclear reactors. Opposite, okay, starting to increase in price, going back above 100,000 disk on actually a bit of a lack of supply. Trade tower is not doing anything. Okay, a first spike, 113,000 disk for the sellers, still 83,000 for the buyers. Look at that crazy margin, but also look at the complete lack of activity basically in nuclear reactors. 5 sell orders, double that in buy orders, and most of them are just not buying any of this stuff. And in the perimeter trade tower, I mean, there's some more buy orders, but it's 4 more of them. So this one is completely down and out when it comes to the volumes, and so not one that I would invest in right now. Next up, we have the organic mortar applicators. Also did really well through the summer, actually, to get to 1.2 million ISK, which is actually high points, and now it's recovering back towards 1.1 million. Yeah, that for the sellers. Buyers, let's take a look at that. Actually a decent amount of buyers in the trade hub, but look at the price though. They're just basically competing with each other, and just above 1 million for the buyers is actually correct. Definitely seeing not too much demand, but it's able to defend its price very well here on the organic mortar applicators. Next up here we get to robotics, also one that, just like the mechanical parts, does seem to potentially be dropping off a little bit more sharply than before here, playing with 95,000 on daily averages, 97,000, 98,000 for most sellers, less than 95,000 for the buyers. I'd still be patient a little bit. I'd want to actually see the 5-day moving average dip below 95k before jumping in, but potentially it could still happen. After that, we get the self-harmonizing power cores going for a 1-year high point on not that many volumes. This is definitely very strange. 2.5 million for the sellers, 2.3 million for the buyers, and then outside of JITA, nope, we're not seeing competition there. A little bit of buyers definitely in the perimeter trade hub. Maybe I could go like this, but this is a really nice increase in price. 1-year high point for the sellers at around 2.5 million, buyers also up to 2.3 million. This is a great opportunity for self-harmonizing power cores, in the exact reverse of my expectation. I thought we would see complete lack of demand or interest, but nope, this one is actually climbing well away from its average. Superconductors, that's the opposite. This might be another opportunity. You can clearly see the 5-day moving average going down from 11,000 disk as well, so sellers are coming in at 12,000 disk. Yep, and buyers at 10,200 disks. Yep, still a bit too early. 10,200 is not bad, but would love to see that dip even below that one. This again, mechanical parts. So, now we get the superconductors, and which one was it? The robotics. I mean, they're primed. If this keeps up for like another week or 2 weeks, then I think that we have some real buy opportunities here. But I think patience is going to be the key. Perhaps this September could be the month for PI investments. If my theory, which is definitely more conjecture than actually a theory, holds up, that we'll actually have decreased activity finally, because killing spree ends, summer activity ends, but then of course there is still that transition period where, well, you're away from your vacation period and you gotta go back to work or you gotta go back to school. So that might actually be the month to keep an eye out for. Next up here we get test cultures climbing back up but staying well below 8,000 disks. So here we get 7,500 for the sellers, still 6,500 disks for the buyers. Very cheap. This is one that you could have started to invest in throughout the summer, even starting in May, just because of its lack of popularity. I hope that you did so actually, because if there is a resurgence, if there is like a new structure or anything like that announced, I think test cultures will be primed to go back up, and yeah, buying for 6,000 or 6,500 disks should actually be a really good starting point. And now we get wetware mainframe that's dipping back to a less than average price, but I would say, yeah, sellers managing to hold on to 2.1 million. Buyers are a bit below 2 million ISK, so let's try to find that. Yeah, that's not bad. Potentially, wetware mainframes might be interesting as well. for like a medium-term investment or a bit of a gamble on potentially a new structure. So very interesting. Surprise performer here is the self-harmonizing power cores, one that shoots out to a 1-year high point, and we get some of them that are clearly under pressure, oversupplied, lack of demand that is starting to take over the market there, and potentially we should just keep an eye on that. And maybe I need to revise my expectations from the summer to September, so to fall, early fall or something like that. So definitely something that I will try to keep up with. After that we have the advanced moon materials coming in at 30 minutes. Yeah, all right. Like that. Let's take a look at these. Crystalline carbonites managed to make its way back to around 160 ISK average for the year, and is at this point able to stay there. 160 for the sellers, 151 for the buyers. After that we get the ferrite carbide, same story, went really low in May to 125. It's back 150 to 160, so we are talking 160 for the sellers, 152 for the buyers, exactly right back on its average normal price if you consider this 1-year chart an average price, of course. Then we get the Then we get the titanium carbide chart, a little bit less performing, although started at around 200, went down to like 150, so 175 could be considered an average here, although at the lower end. And then we do have this big war spike that happened in June on the deployment of the Imperium that gave us an incredible opportunity to sell for like double the price. But now we're back, well, 185, that's actually quite okay, 173 for the sellers. I'd call this an average price for titanium carbide as well. And then we have tungsten carbide that's actually climbing to a slightly above average price at this point, 227 for the sellers, 202 for the buyers. So carbonites have definitely managed to come back to, well, nothing too crazy, but basically average prices for the year. Let's take a look at the metamaterials next. Here are the photonic metamaterials following suit, right? Very bad performance here, May and June. Bottom price of like 15,000 ISK. We're trying to get back to 20k exactly for the sellers and 90,000 for the buyers. Back to a normal price, or basically the starting point, and actually slightly above average for the year here. After that we get the plasmonic metamaterial, starts at 20k, actually does really well. We get one March dip here, but now trading above average, 25,000 ISK for the sellers, 24,000 for the buyers. Quick look at the perimeter trade tower. Nope, it's nothing that really competes with the lowest sellers, so this one is clearly still dominated by Jita as well, and doing really well above average. After that we have the non-linear metamaterials. These are going back to 25,000 ISK. Look at this for the year, actually decently close to average. 27,000 in fact for the sellers, 26,000 for the buyers, so we're above that. I'd call this an average price yet again. And then we have terahertz metamaterials, that's actually above average here, clearly increased actually over this 1-year chart. Quite interesting, a bit of a surprise here, but it's on a complete lack of supply. 27,000 for the sellers, 25,500 for the buyers. So yeah, some metamaterials are actually above average, most of them around average. That's not bad news if you look at the very stale nature of nullsec that we've actually had over the last year or something, or yeah, maybe even a bit more than that, which has caused stuff like if we go for instance ferrite carbide, really big dips in May, April. Those types of months were pretty rough on the advanced moon materials. Next up we have the other ones. Here is fermionic condensates. Now that's a pretty massive drop off after a 1-year high point in July, currently selling for less than 90,000 ISK, buyers are at 86,000 ISK. That's definitely at the low point of the chart. Look at the volatility as well. This is not so bad, right? You could buy now for, let's say, 90,000 ISK, or definitely a bit below that, and then if you could sell for 110 or something like that, you've got a small trade to be made here, and clearly it is possible. The volatility seems to be there. Ferrogel next, actually holding on to an average price, not much to say. Next up we get Fullerites, that was holding on to a price of less than 1000 ISK, actually finally broke out of that. I thought it was a lead price, but no, it's 1,137 ISK for the sellers, 966 for the buyers. So basically, yeah, a nice little jump up here to an above average price for the sellers. Hypersynaptic fibers are staying around average, maybe a touch above that. 14,000 for the sellers, almost 14,000 for the buyers. Really narrow margin, decently good price. Nano transistors working its way to 6,000 ISK all of a sudden. 6,000 for the sellers, 5,800 to 900 for the buyers. Quick look at what I still have. Do I have nano transistors? No, that's unfortunate. I thought maybe I had a stash of those from the May dips, but because that would have been pretty good, right? 5,000 to 6,000 ISK, 20% increase in price would have been nice. Phenolic composites next. Really rough year for the phenolic composites, going as low as 1,500 ISK on some price points, I think, especially for the buyers. All right. 2,400 for the sellers, 2,300 for the buyers, trying to get back to an average 2,500 ISK. Not bad when it comes to a comeback over a summer period, I would say. And then we have these ceramic fibers that are also trading a little bit above average, just shy of 550, 530 for the sellers, 512 for the buyers. So overall, advanced moon materials have done really well, I would say, to come back to their average prices, despite the fact that they've done so through summer months. Let's hope for some real activity in 0-0. I'd love to see another big war, but right now with the chaos era, I do think that a theory that I read when the blackout was first announced, that this does force existing entities that want to hold their cohesion to basically huddle up even more, which is gonna make larger conflicts harder to actually materialize in the game. Next up, take two ships. Let's move on to those at 36 minutes. All right. Round numbers. Let's get started here on the Aries, and after like basically almost 2 months of very flat prices at around 26.6 million on average, we finally see a move here, a jump up towards 30 million ISK for the sellers, 25 million for the buyers. So this is nothing too special, basically puts the ship back at an average price. At look for buyers decently below 25 million for an actual buy opportunity, although if you keep an eye on this margin here, let's take a quick look at sellers in the perimeter trade hub. All right, there's one of them actually dominating with 141 that's selling for a lower price, but if that can get rid you can get rid of that one, then you do have a decent margin. Buy for 25, sell for 30, that's like a fifth of the price, 20%. There should be a trade in there. Next up, we've got the Basilisk going back to a slightly above average price as well. 270 million for the sellers, 230 for the buyers. That's a really decent margin here again. Is the perimeter trade tower? Yep, actually, yeah, this is interesting. We're gonna keep that up for the Tech 2 ship market, I think. It's not with many, but you clearly see the difference in taxes, allowing them to undercut JITA quite a bit on the sell price. 250 and 240 for two Basilisks, 230 for the buyers. Keep that in mind. So this is pretty interesting. Average price though going up towards 270 million ISK. So I do expect those two to be snagged up decently quickly. Cerberus trying to stay above average, getting back to that 250 range, which I'd say is an average price. 256 for the sellers, 235 for the buyers, and here we're not seeing any real competition in the perimeter trade tower, so it might be decently limited. Next up, we've got the Crow, actually also clawing its way back above 30 million ISK. Not bad. 33.4 million for the sellers, 29 million for the buyers, so this is clearly up in price as well. To an average price, you could say, maybe even a touch above that. The Guardian went up to 250. This one is dipping down a bit, but I'd need to see buyers below 200 before I call it a clear buy opportunity. Yeah, 220 in the trade tower, 228 in JITA, and then 203 for the buyers. Clearly a margin between those two that is quite healthy, but to me a little bit too early to actually jump on this as a buy opportunity. Then we've got the Heretic flat at 80 million ISK here, 82 almost for the sellers, 70 million for the buyers. Still a clear lack of demand when it comes to interdictors. I think personally that we'd need like a CCP intervention for this to make a bit of a comeback for some reason. I mean, I thought interdictors were really important in fleet fights across the board, but it just is not happening. The demand is not there. and so as a result here, these are actually really low buy prices, very cheap actually, and it is potentially something that you could risk, right? Buy some of these at a cheap price and then hope for a CCP intervention to do something for the interdictors that might bring the ship back into the meta a bit more. Next up, my favorites when it comes to the volatility. Here is a stealth bomber, the Hound. You can see lovely spikes up to 40 million ISK. 1, 2, 3, 4 clear spikes with then low points as well. Could have bought these for 25 million, sold them for 35. I mean, that's a trade that you could have done like 4 times or so in the last year. That is not bad at all. Currently on the recovery, 32 million for the sellers, 31 million for the buyers. This is the in-between phase. Hope for more volatility. Of course, but yeah, stealth bombers, this is a chart that we love. This is why I love the Tech 2 ship market, and it's good to see this back actually, because right after the introduction of moon mining, all of this was super stable, very flat, so it's great to see this volatility back, especially in the stealth bombers. The Ishtar had a bit of a rough ride after reaching a 1-year low point at 190 million ISK. Then the change to the Vexor Navy issue brought it back in the meta, but overproduction seems to be the name of the game in the Ishtar. 215 for the sellers, 206 for the buyers. Not yet playing for 200 million ISK, but if we do get there, and I think we will get there, you could try to invest in Ishtars yet again. This was of course a nice trade to be made, and yeah, this is basically a consequence of the Vexor Navy issue change. So you don't necessarily need a direct change to the interdictors themselves in order to bring them back, potentially. So next up we've got the Manticore, lovely stealth bomber volatility again, 1, 2, 3, 4 spikes up to 40 million ISK, opportunities at 35 million, plenty of those. The bottom though is not 25 million, but something like 28 probably. Currently 34 million for the sellers, 30 million for the buyers. So here again we're in the in-between zone. That is unfortunate, but you need some of those rest periods as well, of course. Can't have constant volatility like that. Next up we get the Munin, did really well over the summer, going up to like 300 million ISK. Now finally coming back down a bit, but basically 263 for the sellers, 230 for the buyers. Decent margin, but it's nowhere near a bottom or a 1-year high point. Nemesis, another stealth bomber, not as pronounced in the spikes, but 32 million, and then the bottoms though go to well below 25 million ISK. And here this July spike, look at that, buy for 24.5, try to sell for 37 million. That's a lovely trade. At the moment we're well above average for the Nemesis, 35 million still for the sellers, 29 million for the buyers. Clearly there's quite a bit margin here and leaving more room for more volatility. Not the best stealth bomber, but not bad either. Then we've got the Olneros. Yeah, this is the worst logistics cruiser in my opinion because of the lack of volumes, and it's actually trading a bit below average and nowhere near a bottom. So, well, actually 200 million for the sellers, 170 for one buyer, then going down to 161, then going down to 155, and even 170 is not bad if you look at this chart. So, Olneros, it's a possibility, you could try to grab one, but don't go crazy because the volumes make it very hard to actually materialize the trades. Next up we get the Purifiers, stealth bomber, so 40, 40, 40, 40, 45 million. I mean, that's the volatility that we want. Bottoms getting closer and closer to 25 million, I think here as well, potentially. So the Purifier now coming down from a 1-year high point here, still going for 38 million, 30 million for the buyers. This is of course the trade potential of Tech 2 ships. After that we get the Poor Saber, 1-year low point yet again. That's a surprise, really a surprise to me. I thought it would be able to hold on to like that 68 to 70 million range, but no, it's just dropping off. 65 million for the sellers, less than that, 60 million for the buyers. Well, if you want to take that interdictor gamble, it's pretty obvious that you should go for the Saber. You're buying these for 60 million. That's quite a ways away from the bottom. It's definitely something to look into, I think. After that we get the Scimitar, trading a bit above average, 259 for the sellers, 230 for the buyers, not much to say there. And then the Stiletto has been surprisingly stable in the last couple of months, slowly declining back to 30 million ISK. You can clearly see that buy bottoms at 25 million should be possible. And 31 for the sellers, 27 for the buyers. Decent margin, but not yet in the right place to be buying or selling. So That's the name of the game in the tech-to-ship market. I would say overall lots of these are recovering from their volatility. Still, bombers I would say are the king of the volatility. They have been incredible for buy and sell opportunities over the last year here, and so definitely one of the better trade aspects I think of EveTalk here is to keep an eye on the tech-to-ship markets. Actually made a couple of these trades as well myself, not as many as I could have or should have, but overall very happy with the tech-to-ship market now that we finally recovered and people are getting all their production cycles you know, tuned out. Everything is working properly when it comes to moon mining, advanced moon materials, and finally tech-to-ships. And so we've got this back. It's been a lot worse like 2 years ago when it comes to the volatility here. After that, we are moving on to the tick tree market at 40, let's call it 45 minutes. Like that. And yeah, the tick tree ship market, especially the shore market, in my opinion, has been decently healthy, pretty flat, right? Not like you could do a lot of trades in this one, but when it comes to at least finding an aspect of industry in the game that is responding well to market forces, I'd say the tactical shore market has been my poster child for that. So let's start here with the confessor, for instance. Slight decline in the last week, back down from 40 million to 38 million, pretty much 39 for the sellers, 35 million for the buyers. And then what we do still see is a decent amount of supply, even in the last 2 days, like a full front page. But look at the volumes, 5, 1, 6. Those have clearly declined now that the prices are going to less than 40 million ISK. And that's the normal response that you would expect once prices dip to like a slightly below average. Volumes decrease as well, giving opportunity for other ships that might be higher to actually see more supply to finally decline, and thus that one can then go back up a little bit in price, like here, like here, like here. So let's see what the Hecate is doing. That one is actually at a high point, 47.5 million, well above the confessor, well above average. And let's take a look at that. 47.5 million for the sellers, 42 million for the buyers. But look at this, last 24 hours starts here, and here is where we see 18, 18, 22, 35. So here is pretty obvious that supplies are increasing to take advantage of that better price in the Hecate market. And so if you're a producer of this is really good news. You can try to switch your production, try to get the best prices for all the materials that you have, and as a result you've got healthy margins, healthy activity, not too much supply, not too little. It just fluctuates from time to time, creating these kinds of opportunities. And yeah, the Hecate obviously shows quite a decent amount of volatility actually, especially with the higher potential, with the spikes up to 47.5 million, even 48 million from time to time. So right now Hecate is doing really well on price, and thus we see more supply coming in. After that we get a Jackdaw, also very popular, went to 40 million ISK in the last month or so, and is actually spiking up as well. So we're talking 47 million for the sellers, 41 million for the buyers. And here I think that basically this one is communicating a little bit more closely with the confessor market. I think this one was oversupplied a bit in the last couple of weeks. This is finally dropping off. You can clearly see that there's still ships being brought to the market, but it's no longer this. This is a bit older, this is a bit older, these are a bit older. So that was causing some problems, and then finally this is slowing down, and actually the Jackdaw is going up. So I think that this one will then see, in the last 24 hours starts here. Volume still have to pick up, but in the next week I fully expect that to happen. And so the Jackdaw, just like the Hecate, doing really well, 47 million for the sellers. Couple of nice spikes on this one. Obviously Jackdaw very popular. I think it's a great ship. And then finally we get this Vepel, at the moment the least popular tactical destroyer, that is staying below 40 million ISK. 40 million for the sellers, 35.5 for the buyers. And here you can see this is the worst price pretty much. So new supply is very low. You've got some batches, but the activity is quite a bit lower in this one. The meta plays its part as well, of course, but still 40 million for a Vepel I think is quite respectable. It's got its market. People are managing to from time to time sell these ships as well. And so overall, this one can actually often act as a bit of a funnel for either extra production or, when these others are just overshooting a little bit too much, then you'll actually see some volatility in this vehicle as well, creating, for instance, if we get a real dry up, if this gets too bad, right? No, I'm saying this gets too bad, and then the jackdaw as well. And then eventually, it's actually going to start to pull supply from this vehicle market, pushing that price up above 40 million as well. You can see that it happened a couple of times. So yeah, the tactical destroyer market doing really well. 40 million seems to be the average price where people are like, okay, let's wait and see, let's keep things steady. And right now the Hecate and the Jackdaw are actually at high points, doing really well. So expect supply of these to increase, expect supplies for the Confessor to decrease a bit. Who went below 40 million is that could easily make a comeback, and potentially this vehicle will see slightly higher prices on average as well once these two take over the production. But that's healthy, normal market response, so I'm very happy to see that. After that, we've got the cruiser market, and that's the exact opposite. I see too low volumes, too low availability, and often, in my opinion, manipulation attempts here, just like with the Legion, going from 140 million to 200 million pretty much, like in the span of a couple of weeks. This was obviously sort of a realistic. Now competition does start from this point, so we can clearly see that we're declining in price at this point. 187 for the sellers, 164 for the buyers. Buyers have been forced up, but they're very careful, and you can see that supply here is still doing really well in the last 24 hours. Quite a few sell orders, but it's this one. Let's see if I can find a 206 at 200 million. That was, I think, basically a manipulation attempt to get more out of the market. Is it the bad news? I would say is that you can clearly see here, and then that it crushes the volumes, right? It's not very good for the volumes, but anything that gets traded here, if it's the right person, then you do have trades here that are happening at much better prices than you would have right here on this part of the market, which happened on super low volumes, giving potential to these sorts of manipulations. Next up, we've got the Loki, flat on the average price, maybe even a touch below average, so not much to say here. 189 for the sellers, 178 for the buyers. Decently narrow margin supply wise. Here is in the last 24 hours, bit of a gap between that, and nothing too crazy. So the Loki actually looks kind of okay. Average price, it's also the most popular one. Decent supply, nothing too crazy, and availability is actually a little bit too high. Here 200 million, quite a bit of competition. Then you go down 197, 195, 193, 192, quite a bit, 180, 190. So yeah, this feels like one that's going to be a lot harder to just like buy up, relist at 250 million ISK, and then allow competition to come back in. But any trades that you do manage to make there make you a lot of ISK. And then next up here we get the Proteus, that's also doing decently well for the least popular Tech 3 Cruiser. 170 for the sellers, 155 for the buyers. But availability, this is slightly worrying, especially if the price was lower. And so here 130 was the bottom. We're basically to a slightly above average price for the Proteus, selling for around 170. This one is still ripe for manipulation, very risky, I think, and so people are just not making and bringing a lot of Protei to the market. Finally, we get a Tengu that's actually jumping up in price in the last week, back above 180 million. 182 now for the sellers, 162 for the buyers. That's a really big margin. And again, availability, yeah, it's not that great. It's better than the Proteus, of course. It is a more popular ship, but it's not that great, especially considering that in the last 24 hours you see 19 here, but then lots of 1s and 2s. The Tech 3 Cruiser market is in a rough spot, in my opinion. Just not too popular, and that these activities here become possible, and people do try them from time to time, and so not something that I personally would be trading in. Basically, I feel like there's a lot of risk that you're taking. If, for instance, you're starting to invest in Protei, the popularity just isn't there. If you're looking at the Tengu, well, you could try to buy some of these at 162, but unfortunately, if you try to sell them then for a competitive price, you can immediately feel, considering these volumes, that there is much more available out there. There's people ready to dump this market down as well. And so, yeah, no, this is completely different from the tactical destroyer market. This one feels very difficult to actually recommend for trading and even production at this point. Yeah, the cruiser market, it's a different beast from the destroyer market. And then finally we are going to move on to the extra products. It's gonna be a personal look at the Society of Conscious Thought chips, like the Praxis, which I've actually been using quite a bit for the new invasions. So coming in at, let's say, 5405. So let's see if I can find them in like a category. Are they like special edition ships? Let's see. Battle cruisers. Yep, here's the Gnosis, for instance. All right. So the Gnosis went to a really low point during the summer. That's interesting. Summertime, a low Gnosis price. Average, you could say, 27.5 million. We are now climbing closely towards that. 27.2 for the sellers, 23.5 for the buyers. There's clearly a bit of lack of demand here, and unfortunately I'm like 2 months too late to take a look at the Gnosis for like 1 year low points here with buy price of less than 22 million. So a difficult summer, low price and very high availability apparently, considering these volumes for the Gnosis. Next up, what else do we have? Do they have a frigate? If I'm not mistaken, they do have one. Nope, not the Echo. Not the Echo. Which one? The Zephyr, I think, is from the Society of Conscious Thought. Used to be a special one that the sleepers don't. Doesn't exactly say that it's Society of Conscious Thought, but at least it's a special edition ship as well. So let's take a look at that price. Actually, up in price quite a bit. Starts the year well below 50 million ISK on average. Even looks like 40 million is currently selling for 71 million on a bit of a lack of availability. 56 million for the buyers. The Zephyr looks like basically a bit like a mini Gecko that's going up in price just on the complete lack of availability and new supplies here. Very interesting. Then we have the Praxis. Definitely want to look at that one as well. Praxis. Let's just go like that for this one. Here is the Praxis. Ooh, look at that. Of course, CCP gave out these ships as well on some of these events, increasing in volumes, thus decreasing the price. Man, we should have grabbed this. Praxis, 60 million ISK, now already trading for 82 million ISK, 73 million for the buyers, and average price 90 million. I think we'll slowly climb to that. The Praxis is actually a really nice battleship, so you're still grabbing it well below average right now. And yeah, that summer slump due to like rewards is actually more important than what I thought. And if I'm not mistaken, you also have a destroyer. Let's see, standard destroyers. Nope. Why the hell doesn't he show up here? Oh, because I have to go to special edition ships. And then we find the destroyers, and then we have the Synesis. Yeah, same thing here. Right, 7.5 million average price. We're back there. 7.9 for the sellers, 6 million for the buyers. But then that dip here, we went as low as 4 million ISK on the rewards. And yeah, all right, that does make this an interesting category, something to try to remember. I'm not really always too good at that, but Synesis, Praxis, and Gnosis. When CCP gives them out, there is a massive opportunity to buy them for apparently half the normal price. Especially here on the Praxis, that is a very big opportunity that we dropped because I didn't take a look at that. And so something that, especially if you guys managed to remind me at the right time, a trade that we could have made very easily. Grab these for 60 million ISK. You're already selling them for 81 million, and the normal price is going to be 90 to 100 million ISK. So yeah, something to absolutely remember. When CCP gives out more of these special ships, go to the market, look at what the reaction is, and if it's massive enough, like here, 40% decrease in price, then you should definitely make a move on that, because After that, you've got the comeback, and if through September and then the winter they don't bring more of these ships, you're very easily gonna see 100 million on some occasions as well for these ships, perhaps on new content and things like that. So these are ships that you can very easily trade on depending on exactly what CCP does when it comes to rewarding players in special events. A lesson that we have to try to remember, because this would have been a massive and completely risk-free opportunity for us here. I'm actually a little bit disappointed that I didn't grab that myself and take advantage of that myself, because now I remember grabbing them from the redeem items, putting them, oh, I get another Praxis, oh, that's great, and another Gnosis, oh, great, awesome. So that was for the anniversary of EVE Online that we got all those rewards. Definitely something to remember when that happens again, to make sure that we can jump on those opportunities as well. So all right, next up, that's gonna be it actually for this EVE Talk. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and as always, I'll see you next time.